Welcome back to What Do I Know? This is episode 5. And the timeline I'm going to be dealing with today is just going from that middle of March 2020 through to June, moreover, the beginning of June of 2020. I'm going to start by saying that the most important date to remember at this time will be the 18th of March 2020, when all 7 of us agreed to suspend meetings of Anfield Parish Council due to COVID and the fact that we were at that time in national lockdown, and we were following the guidance of the government of the day, and we were awaiting further guidance. Now, as we all know, we did get that further guidance in the form of the Coronavirus Act of that year. Section 78 applied to us, moreover Section 78 subsection 5 with regards to meetings, and we were told we could have meetings as long and they could be virtual meetings, so we could get a virtual meeting platform, Zoom or Teams or whatever, so we can have our meetings. But before I get to that point, it's important that you remember that we had got the fiasco of neighbours helping neighbours, and that suddenly we found, well, when I say we, I mean myself, Brian, Barry and Jean, we found that Parish Council was collecting personal and special category data of people for a scheme being run by Councillor Julie Smith. It was at this time that I did get contact from a good number of residents, obviously by phone and by email, describing this scheme really as a scheme that's been run on a very ad hoc basis, and that they had concerns that people were sharing their information, their personal and special category data with these individuals, and that it seemed that from what was been put out there, it's been done in the name of the Parish Council. Well, from our side of things, we went to great efforts and attempts to point out that it was not being done on behalf of the Parish Council. It had never been to the Parish Council. I want to say publicly now that if it had, I would likely have supported the scheme, but there would have been a large number of stipulations. First stipulation being we had to do a DPIA, a Data Protection Impact Assessment, because of what we were undertaking. Also, I would have insisted that it was not just down to those 3 councillors and Councillor Julie Smith, it was the clerk, and it would have been all 7 of us, and one way or another, that information had to be passed to us so we knew who we were dealing with, because if we had a situation where we had so many off one ward, one off another ward, and one off another ward, because with 3 wards on the parish here in Anfield, we all would have known, and it would have made life a lot easier. But of course, that didn't happen, and they went off and did it their own sweet way. Now, it was around about, I'd say about 22nd, 23rd of March, I got a very strange email from Ashley, in which she'd written, "Hello everyone, Councillor Moore has asked whether it would be possible for HBC to set up a hardship fund for those in absolute need of food supplies which they cannot afford. My only suggestion could potentially be to submit a motion via email to gauge responses by councillors and submit a retrospective approval at a future council meeting. The fund could be a ring-fenced amount of circa £5,000. Any requests to come to me and I can file receipts against purchase of any food parcel aid. Thoughts please, regards Ashley." Well, I'm going to point out now that what he's written there would have been illegal if we'd done it. Number one, you cannot submit a motion via email for a council. You cannot do that because it has to be done in public. This is public funds we're talking about. Are you saying that a whole load of public email addresses should be included in that one so the public can see it? So members of the public who haven't got our personal email addresses can now see them. So that was wrong, completely wrong. Him suggesting that he was going to receipt things and then we could retrospectively approve it. I'm going to admit now, I jumped on that and I waved a very magical set of documents at him and referred to them. And I don't think you need to guess what they were, because I made sure that the certain sections of them, he read them, and he understood them. And it was a bit more than the standing orders, it's also the finance regs. And I said, you can't do that. I said, you're asking for a fund of £5,000, right? Let me get this straight. £5,000 that you're just going to give out to members of the public, and you've not considered the standing orders of the finance regs. Number one, you're asking us to do something that would have been illegal in any event, even if we weren't, in COVID, in lockdown. It would have to have come to a council meeting. Not just a council meeting, a finance committee meeting. Now, there was no way in the world I was going to start saying, waive that and let it go straight to full council. No. I'm the chair of finance. One of my duties is to make sure that the public funds, the public purse is protected and it's not abused. No way in the world I'm going to let that go to full council without it's gone through my finance committee. No way. So I made that clear. I said no. A great support from Barry and Brian, and Barry went further. Barry made it quite clear that if there are any cases of hardship because of what had been handed down by national government, those cases of national hardship had to be registered with either the county council or borough council. In our case, it's a county council and it's Cheshire East. Cheshire East had set up a scheme that was called People Helping People. And in those cases had to be registered for that scheme. And it would have been made very clear by the coordinator who was taking care of our area of Cheshire East that if there had been an overriding need in Handful, that would have been immediately addressed and we all would have known. And those people needing that help would have got it. I also made it quite clear, because of my distinct lack of not just confidence but distinct lack of trust in certain individuals, there was no way in the world I was going to hand £5,000 of ratepayers or taxpayers' money over for that lot to control. Why? We wouldn't have known where it went. I had no trust or confidence, and I can certainly say that resonated not just in the other three councillors on our particular side, but in a good number of residents who we were in touch with. They were saying, you can't give them our money. How do we know it's really going to go to the poor and the needy? That's not me saying that. This is feedback we were getting. I had another wonderful email, a gentleman on my ward, who wrote quite simply, please do not give them that, because how do we know, this is his words, not mine, how do we know it's not going to be an abused fund? That made me sit up and think, oh, he's got a point there. How do we know it's going to be an abused fund? So I made it clear to Ashley, you cannot let a penny go. And I had to say to Ashley, if I find you've done that, you're going to tie my hands. Oh, what do you mean tie my hands? I said, I'm going to have to report the issue. Well, who to? I said, the police, because it will be a complete misuse of public funds. I said, do we not? I said, are we not clear that this is not council money? This is actually public money, and we can't play around with it. I was fuming. To be quite honest, I was fuming. At this time as well, I can say that, particularly Barry O'Brien, they were getting in touch with the charities around here, particularly one by the name of Hope Central, and we were getting a picture saying the situation's not good, but it's not bad. We knew that funds were going into it, and we asked them if they needed any more. Well, Brian got the feedback, no, and I still have the email to that extent. It was, they said, no, we are okay. Now, this is how dastardly they were. 2 days after Ashley sends this email around with this suggestion from Councillor Susan Moore, Councillor Cynthia Sampson puts it on Facebook that 4 councillors have agreed to set up a hardship fund in HBC's name. No, we haven't. You didn't get that agreement from Brian. You damn sure didn't get it from me. And I know you didn't get it from Barry. And I know this. You didn't get it from Jeannie, you never would. So you got 4 of us who'll tell you now, no way in the world would we ever agree to that. No. Secondly, putting that on Facebook and stating that's been done, that's just not misleading to me. That's not just misleading. That's outrageously dishonest. It's also discourteous and disrespectful to fellow councillors. And it also led to me receiving good few emails and some telephone calls to say, what the hell have you done as chair of finance? And I'm like, I've not done anything. I ended up being given no less than 12 copies of that screenshot. To me as well, I looked at that, and after speaking with, my colleagues and friends, I just thought, this is an attempt to bully us, and I'm not gonna kowtow to this. I'm not gonna bow. I'm not gonna break at all. And I also wondered as well, why do they want this money? Because there was 2 other attempts to actually get £5,000. Oh yeah, we even moved from it, so we're going to provide meals, but that was the giveaway. And I'm going to bring you into that and tell you for why. Now you may remember, not so long after this, okay, we found the telephone line had been switched. I've told you that, so I don't need to go over that. So we move into April. On the 2nd of April, I received an email from Ashley asking me to do an advice document, a legal advice document, regards the applicability of the Coronavirus Act, Section 87, regards our public meetings. I wrote back to Ashley saying, I'll do your document, but it's not going to be an advice one, because A, I feel like I've got a conflict of interest, and B, I don't think, to be honest with you, that's going to do me any good, because at that time, I still had my practicing certificate. I'll admit, a couple of months after that, I let it lapse. I didn't renew it because the job I was doing, I didn't need it. I figured, why do I need to waste about 400 quid? I'd rather have the 400 quid in my pocket, to be honest. Makes sense. So I said, I'll do your guidance document. Headed guidance. And I said, look, you can put that around all councillors. Now, I never knew if that document went around all councillors. I suspect it didn't. Because if it did, simply put it, I don't think we would have hit into the problems we would have had. Now, also at this time, we got another request for £5,000. And I said, no, look, you've got to go through the proper channels. You've got to have a meeting. Therefore, you've got to get the virtual meeting platform, whether it be Zoom, whether it be Teams. Your choice, but you've got to get it. I actually pointed to finance regs and to the overlap in the standing orders. I said, look, it's not going to go over 500 quid. Go and price it out. Go and check it. Tell me and Brian, because I've got some news for you. There are duties that the clerk, the chair and the vice chair can do. 1, we can do the audit reports, we can check the accounts, and we can go over the accounts. Okay? We can sign off any audit reports. We are allowed to do that. That's been put in the situation where that can happen. Now, luckily, we did have a situation where there was Brian as chair, me as vice chair, and then somebody else as chair of finance. I was chair of finance. So we had that in order. It took an arm and a leg, because eventually we got some finance reports from Ashley, but I suddenly noticed going through them, and I go through everything with a fine-tooth comb, particularly accounts, there was overspends. And I thought, how the hell's that happened? What's going on here? Are these figures right? So I gave that back to Brian, and Brian gave it to Ashley, and we stumbled on. And again we said to Ashley, will you get a virtual meeting platform? And I was back and tune of emails, I'd say, for about 3 weeks, and bang, towards the middle of end of April, it ended. Now also at this time, Brian would do his updates regards to the work with the charities that he and Barry were doing. And he would always entitle it Notes from Lockdown. It was always wonderfully written. Brian's first such email in this extent came at the beginning of May. Now bearing in mind, before it's all right, we'll do that. We're still going on about the £5,000 here. They're still wanting, desperate for the £5,000. And I'm going, no, you've got to get a virtual meeting platform. But Ashley's now gone stum. He's gone quiet. That conversation's died a death. And we couldn't get an answer. Me and Brian couldn't get an answer Barry couldn't get an answer. But Brian wrote this, okay? He wrote a fairly detailed email noting what had happened since our last parish council on the 10th of March, and that he and Ashley have been working on a number of things since lockdown. I was well aware of these. Now, importantly, he stated that during that time, yes, that contact had been made with various charities in Hamforth, particularly Hope Central, formerly Hampers of Hope, to ensure they got adequate funds and supplies of food, which they told us quite clearly they had. Brian had also been in touch with a good number of individuals across Hamforth, as had Barry, asking if they're aware of anyone in financial hardship or who couldn't get out and get the shopping done, and asking them to get any such residents to call Brian or email Barry to make sure they got their help. We did donate from the Chairs Fund £250 to Hope Central. That could clear, that's not a problem. It was beneath that threshold. That was fine. We could do that. At this time, we also picked up that, yes, there is a principal route for Cheshire East, and it's People Helping People scheme, as the government had asked to be set up for help for food parcels and other help. We'd also been in touch with primary schools and asked them if they needed any help with children who would normally be entitled to free school meals. Barry had fielded that and had come back and said, at that time, we weren't aware of any, but we had got it high on the radar that we didn't want any kids going without food at home because they'd been forced to stay at home and couldn't go to school because of COVID. We'd also set up a situation where Brian had contacted Tesco at Hamforth Dean to give priority help to NHS and key workers. Even though we didn't get a formal response, we did get one from Tesco UK wide saying that they had introduced such a scheme, so we were quite happy with that. He noted various other areas of business, and we got a response, and it came from Sue Moore, and I've never read an email like it in my life. It was so offensive to Brian. She wrote, I'm not going to say all of it, I'm going to say quite a bit of it. Dear Councillor Tolver, thank you for your long but not very informative email. Well, I certainly found it informative. I'm not sure what area you're talking about, but it certainly is not Hamforth. You talk about there being no deprivation in our village, but sadly I can confirm that you are incorrect. I don't think she understands deprivation, because we were getting the figures to see whether things have been registered, and there was nothing like that coming up in Hamforth at this time. We were right on the ball here. So that, I don't know where she's coming from. That she's plucked out of the air, whatever. I don't know where she's getting that from, but that's rubbish. She goes on, it said, it's a great pity that you have not spoken to your parish or ward councillors about the state of the village. Well, he had. That's why he put round the notes from lockdown, was asking for something constructive, not as rude. Now, bearing in mind Brian's noted, now, People Helping People, that's Cheshire East scheme. She says, as you well know, Councillor Julie Smith set up her People Helping People for those in need in the village before Cheshire East got their group going. Wrong. Yours was Neighbours Helping Neighbours, all right? Cheshire East did it under national guidance from central government. Not a group, it's a national guidance thing. Let's get that right. Okay? I'm not going to go on with the rest of the waffle because I'll bore you to tears. I'm just not. Okay? But this is the giveaway. Here she says, as regard food parcels, John Smith has to date taken 9. Julie Smith is on a weekly basis taking 60 people in hardship in the parish, all from Hope Central. Fine, okay. If you look at Rob and his Angels on Facebook, you will see the marvellous work he and his group are doing, feeding the needy. Yesterday, I believe, they delivered 1,250 meals throughout Hamforth, Winslow, Hill Green, Bramhall, etc. Thanks for the giveaway. Now we know what the £5 is for. You're trying to rival that group. A group that was properly set up, I may add. That set up a GoFundMe page, got its accounts, that got itself in line and in order. In other words, streets ahead of what they were doing. As she goes on, I'm not at all sure where you get your figures from, but perhaps you might like to chat or call Councillor Julie Smith, who is and always has been very proactive in our community, and give you a very clear picture of the state of this village. Well, we were getting figures from Cheshire East. The registered figures, we were getting those. So we knew. We were well and truly on the ball. And she finishes off, it's a great shame that HBC did not see fit to get on board with the help that is very clearly needed, and has left it to individual members of the public to provide the assistance that is required in this village. I think your comments only go to show how out of touch you really are with the community, Councillor Moore. No, as far as I'm concerned, I think your comments in this email are immature. They're rude and offensive. And I will say this, I did say to Brian that could be construed to be a breach of the code of conduct, because you can't send emails like that to your fellow councillors. You can't do that. It's not permitted. So Brian was fuming about it. I said, ignore it. Don't email back to her. It's what she wants. It's what they want. Silence is the best way. We did it. Brian was brilliant on that one. I said, ignore her. Let's continue the work we're doing. I want to point out when she says, isn't it a great shame that HBC couldn't get on board? Well, isn't it a great shame that the clerk couldn't comply with the law in coming up with his idea and couldn't comply with what the officers of the council had requested, and that was a virtual meeting platform, so something like this could be done. So this could be made legal instead of having you guys wandering around, collecting personal data, collecting special category data in the name of HBC and bringing it into disrepute. It would have been so much easier if we'd played with the rules. But we didn't. The clerk didn't. The only ones who were doing it were 4 of us. Right? The only ones. That was it. Exactly. So what do you expect us to do? What do you expect me to do as a chair of finance? I'm not just going to give you £5. It's got to go through the proper channels. It has to. It was at this time as well, my worries grew that we were not getting a virtual meeting platform, because one of the things we had decided was that if we could have got that virtual meeting platform, we would have had the annual parish meeting at which new chair, vice chair and all that would have been elected. Barry and I had gone and got some legal advice because Brian had made it clear he didn't want to continue as chair. And I said I didn't want to take it on myself. And Barry said, well, I'm going to have to remain as the mayor for the next year because we can't do a mayor making. We can't do what we need to do. And I said to Barry, I said, could we do a dual chairship? Is there anything to stop us doing that? Because I'd seen it done before. And I wondered if it was still allowed, still legal. So I contacted a good friend of mine, barrister. And I asked him, and he said, nothing to stop me as far as I'm aware. And he did some research, I did some research, we could do it. So the plan was, we were going to have a dual chairship with me and Barry as chair. I was going to remain as chair of finance, Brian was going to drop down to vice chair. That's how it was going to go. On top of that, because Jean had concerns about Brian chairing meetings, the fact he'd given John Smith his platform back in November previous year, of course, to say I'm going on sabbatical. We said, that's how it's going to be. And Jean went, yeah, I'm going to come back at the annual parish meeting. Well, we couldn't do one because actually we wouldn't get a virtual meeting platform. For some reason, that ground to halt. We're still getting silence at this time. Can't get an answer, can't get anything. So we move on through May. We're monitoring national and regional incidents. We're looking at what's going on. We're trying to stay safe. Those of us like myself working from home. We then hit the beginning of June. And what happened, the 9th of June, I'll never forget. It's a date that lives in infamy in the history of Handforth Parish Council and of Handforth politically. On the 8th of June, I was in my mid-morning break from work, and this would be about 11, and I was downstairs in the kitchen. I was making a cup of tea, and I was pondering about what was going on. No meetings, and I was thinking, could we be in trouble here? There is a 6-month rule. Are we going to be in trouble? I get a phone call from Brian, and Brian says to me, as I'm making this cup of tea and thinking about this, have you seen my email? I said, no, Brian, I've not had a chance to look at my emails. I've been at work all morning, but I will have a look at it, and I will get back to you in my lunch break. I went back to work, and I finished off what I was doing, and I was on my lunch break, and I read Brian's email. And in that email, he had received the clerk that morning who had told Brian that he was going to disqualify Jean because she'd exceeded the 6 months grace period and has automatically disqualified herself. And I looked at it and thought, that's rubbish. Brian absolutely disagreed. He said, there's been no meetings in the last 2 to 2.5 months. So making this decision is wrong because it's been impossible to attend meetings. Brian correctly advised Ashley on the 8th of June 2020 that this is a matter to rule upon. As in, this has got to come to council, therefore you're going to have to get a virtual meeting platform, give Jean her rights, and give us the opportunity to consider whether or not the 6-month rule should be applied. That's how that works under Section 85. There's no other way. Okay? Of course, if the council doesn't come, that's different. The following day, Brian emailed me again, stating that this is what Ashley had proposed to do, and that he'd been that very morning on the 9th to Brian's house stating he was going to disqualify Jean. I asked Brian what time it'd been. I actually phoned Brian, and he said, oh, he'd been here about 11 o'clock. Okay. About 45 minutes after I'd been on the phone to Brian, I got a phone call from Jean's husband, Mike. Same day, 9th of June, 2020, saying that Ashley'd called up their house, he was in the front garden, and that he'd handed Mike a letter that was advising Jean that she'd been disqualified, and in so handing Mike the letter, he said, and I quote, "Don't shoot the messenger." Now, I don't know what you think that means, but I got the immediate impression he's saying this is a council decision or a decision taken by Brian and myself. I was very, very worried about this because I thought, hang on. I said, right. I then said to Mike, I said, right, I'm going to ring Brian. I said, because there's something wrong. I asked Mike, what time have you been? He said, Mike said, oh, he was here about 10 to 10:30. And Mike had made a note of it. And I thought, 10 to 10:30. Rewind it up a bit. And I said to Mike, I said, I've just had Brian on the phone telling me that Ashley was at his place at about 11ish this morning saying he was coming to your house to disqualify Jean. Mike went, no. He said, I know it were after 11. He said, go inside. I know it was after 11. It's 10 o'clock. It was between 10 and 10 this morning. So when I suddenly realised I'd actually lied to Brian, I said, Mike, I'm going to ring Brian. I said, give me 10 minutes. I said, and you ring Brian and tell him. I said, I'll also tell Barry. I rang Brian and I told Brian what happened. To say that Brian hit the roof would be an understatement. Brian was fuming. I informed Brian that I'd received this call from Mike and that Ashley had been at Mike's between 10 and 10:30 that morning, and that he had misled the chair regards to his planned actions that day, and that he'd been to Mike and Jean's and he'd handed the letter over and he had gone and disqualified Jean. I told Barry, and Barry was not happy. But before we could do anything, the clerk had jumped the gun. He'd advised Democratic Services at Cheshire East that there was a casual vacancy when there was not, and never had been. He'd also placed notices in the village notice boards and posted notices on the HBC website. We were fuming. Absolutely fuming. We automatically knew that the clerk had acted ultra vires because he does not, and this was confirmed to us by NALC, but also confirmed to us in legal advice because we immediately took legal advice. We bought and paid for this. Again, it's 2 or 3 grand's worth gone out there. We never claimed a penny back. Perhaps we should have done. I think we did the right thing not to. We were told quite clearly that the clerk did not have the power authority to undertake such an action of his own volition, and that he took this action without any power authority. So I said, in other words, he's acted ultra vires. And I was told, yeah, he has. For those of you who don't know, ultra vires is Latin for outside the scope of the authority, or outside the scope of his, I wouldn't say power, but authority, which is what he'd done. At that time, myself as Vice Chair and Councillor Berkeley as Chair of the Employment Committee immediately communicated with the clerk, advising them that he had been completely wrong to disqualify Jean and that he had no power authority to do what he had done. We reiterated the legal advice we got, but the clerk ignored these communications and he refused and failed to respond. On the 12th of June, the Chair, the Vice Chair, that's Brian and myself, Councillor Berkeley, we did again consult with and instructed a council again about the legality of this expulsion and asked that council to put his advice in writing. He did that. We got that within 3 hours. So we were sitting on that. Immediately Brian decided he's going to email this to our MP, Esther McVeigh. She was brilliant and she agreed to take the matter to the Government Legal Department in Parliament. They came back. Before that, the advice from Council was quite clear. We were looking at the Operations Section 85(1) of the Local Government Act. Correct? And we were. Now, this is how this all went. Okay? This is how all this went. We've had a mess that's been caused by our clerk. We've now got the JLD involved, we've now got NALC involved, and a barrister involved. Okay? Yes. We've then got Cheshire East involved. We've written to the CEO, we've written to the monitoring officers saying that our clerk has jumped the gun and that he shouldn't have done that at all. We didn't get any help whatsoever. Now, I think one of the problems was the then monitoring officer, Mrs. Jan Batewell, was leaving Cheshire East to go and take up a new role at St Helens. And I don't think she was entirely bothered. Unfortunately, left us in one hell of a mess. And I mean in one hell of a mess. We've now got a clerk who's jumped the gun who will not respond to emails from councillors. Okay? I had to put a very formal email to Ashley and I broke down the legal advice. That's not all we found out. At this time, Ashley provided us copies. He said he'd taken advice, and he provided us copies of his advice. You're not going to believe this. He'd actually gone and asked for a point of legal advice from a person who was not legally qualified, authorised or accredited to give that advice. That person was at Chelk. That person was Jackie Weaver. And I actually did take this issue up with the SRA, who confirmed to me that yes, she had given legal advice when they saw the documents, the emails, and that she should not have done that. And that Jackie Weaver had actually said, yeah, that Jean was a goner. The thing was, Ashley had not given her the full facts. He had not told her that we'd had no meetings for 2.5 months. And he was counting 2.5 months in that time bracket. So he'd not been honest with Jackie Weaver. He'd not told her the truth. And I made it clear to Ashley that such a decision to disqualify a councillor falls to councillors and not you. And I made it clear, as did Brian, as did Barry, and as I know Jean complained, that this goes to full council and that Jean's given the opportunity to either read a statement or have a statement read, and then we consider whether or not it was appropriate that a disqualification be made. Of course, who didn't get the virtual meeting platform? Ashley. Why? I wonder. It was at this time I came out with 3 words. And it's French. And those 3 words put together, 3 words are coup d'état. Coup d'état. Yeah? It's actually 2 words because it's the apostrophe. Coup d'état. And that's exactly what this was. It was a coup d'état. They tried everything. Tried to bully us off the council, didn't work. Tried to bully us into giving them £5,000, didn't work. They wanted us out of the way. So they resorted to this gutter trash tactic. And Ashley had gone through with it. So, there was no way in the world the 3 of us were going to take that. We were going to stand up for what was right. Council, that's the barrister made it very clear to us, as did the GLD, that this disqualification was unfair and that the clerk had actually acted unlawfully. We now got a situation where we'd already felt we'd got gross misconduct. We damn sure knew we had it now. Because Ashley then sat there, so I don't know how to reverse it. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. This rumbled on throughout June. Rumbled on. There was a blunt refusal by Ashley to speak with us, to meet with us, you know. We were having sleepless nights. This is where the seeds of the crisis were sown. We didn't sow them. It was Ashley that sowed them. And he knows, he's still sitting there as clerk, and he knows he did wrong. I'll tell you what we also did as well. We did a letter to the members, because the Cheshire East had a cabinet at that time. We did a letter. And in that letter to all those cabinet members, we laid the facts bare. We even supplied them with copies of the legal advice. Okay? And we quoted 2 cases. Now, I'm going to give you these cases before I leave you. One is called Ree Neeson's application, 1986, from Northern Ireland. And it was applied and upheld in Alexander Fowler versus Falkirk Council in 2005. Okay? Now, as I'm going to show you, when we finally get meetings going, and it took us to the end of August, these idiots were going, oh, one's Northern Ireland, one's Scotland, therefore you can't rely on it. Wrong. Because they're quoted and recorded in Holsbury's Laws of England and Wales and are recognised by the courts in England and Wales. So we had this in our hands. Okay? Our legal advice was clear on this one. Okay? Legal advice stated that there should have been a qualifying meeting within the period that was missed. Right? The last meeting was in March 2020 due to COVID, and HBC suspended meetings. So the clock goes up to there. That's 4 months. That clock doesn't restart until we start having meetings, and then it kicks on. Okay? Remember that one. Barrister made it quite clear, as did the GLD, the Government Legal Department, that the clock stops at the minute you suspend meetings. The date, the minute, the second you suspend meetings. We suspended meetings on the 18th of March 2020. This was now the 9th of June, and we'd had no meetings for 2.5 months. So how can we honestly reach 6 months unless you're lying, scheming and cheating? Unless you are perpetrating and undertaking a coup d'etat and conspiring with it. By the way, coup d'etats and conspiracy in this country are serious criminal offences. I don't know if you know that. These lot obviously certainly didn't or didn't care. Council was quite clear that the clerk had incorrectly applied the time limit, and this was backed again by the Government Legal Department. The qualification period the clerk had applied was from November. He should have applied it from December. He didn't. He applied it from November, so he's got the wrong time limit. Even then, he's got it wrong. Council went further and said, even if HPC business had not been suspended, the decision on the 2nd of June, which is the date of the letter that Ashley gave to Jean, the clerk gave to Jean, to disqualify her, would have been premature and therefore ultra vires. Okay. The GLD further qualified this by stating that there has to be opportunity for a councillor to attend meetings in the 6-month period, and if the council does not have meetings for part of that period, then the councillor could not be penalised for non-attendance. So look, we've got up to March the 18th, we've had December, January, February and the March meetings. That's 4. Bang. 4 months. 4 months, right? We've now got 2.5 months. We've been no meetings, so how do we reach 6 months? And certainly 2nd of June, you're at least a fortnight early. So what's going on? We presented our findings to the CEO, the Deputy CEO and the Head of Democratic Services and the Monitoring Officer at Cheshire East. Yeah. We knew at this time that Jean was still a councillor. She was still a councillor and she had to have her time. There wasn't a case of non-attendance at all. And we had everything on our side. So this is where this mess you saw led to that meeting in December 2020 all started. We had a clerk who refused to communicate with us and get a virtual meeting platform, was going to mess around with finances, particularly to the tune of 5,000 quid's worth of public money, had allowed a scheme that was collecting personal data as well as special category data to go ahead, even though, and gave the impression that council agreed to it even though it hadn't. And on top of that, he'd gone and disqualified a councillor and taken legal advice from a person who was not legally qualified, authorised, registered or accredited to give it. Oh dear. Oh dear. Now you can see the problems. I'm going to leave you with this. At this time, we had a mess. And in terms of Ashley telling us, legal advice, we had stuff from him verbally, but not physically. We had to wait till the following month to find out the real mess. I've given you a little insight about that. There'll be more in the next episode on that one. We also had the problem is as well at this time, because of the clerk's ultra-vires behaviour, Cheshire East had gone and acted on it, and we're going headlong, going to hold an election which was going to be an illegal election. We couldn't get through to CEC, nobody would listen. We were in a mess. We thought, how the hell do we deal with this? What do we do for this? It was one hell of a mess. I mean, Brian did make a mistake at the end of this month. We discussed the situation vis-a-vis Jean, and that we knew, as Jean knew, that she could put in a statement to council and that could come through the offices of the council. Brian mistakenly at this time, in sending an email to myself, Barry and Jean, also copied Ashley into it. And in that email, he did actually say we could be looking at the possible dismissal of the clerk. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. This is the final thing. If you get something like that that's missent to you and you know it's not for you, what you meant to do with it by law? Do you keep it? Do you want to show it to your mates, show it to your family? What do you do? Well, I'm going to tell you what you do, because this was also advice received from the ICO. I knew that advice was coming. You don't keep it to yourself, and you don't share it around your friends and your colleagues. You contact the person who has mistakenly sent it unless they've recalled it, and you ask them What do you want me to do with it? So Ashley should have contacted Brian. Brian would have told him, you destroy it and you prove to me you destroyed it, and these are the steps. And you must fill in this log. Okay? Ashley didn't do that. I'm going to tell you something about that email. That email, as we discovered, even I learned something new, that email had personal data in it. That personal data, technically, because Brian was the sender, belonged to him, but it also referred to me, to Jean, to Barry. It also said in that email and talked about a statement. And Brian was saying, you know, he would draft it. Not that he was just going to draft it and say it was on behalf of Jean. He was going to help draft it if it wanted to be dictated. Now, I can tell you no such statement was ever drafted. We didn't need to, because Jean did her own. And boy, was it a statement. But Ashley, nastily, connivingly and mischievously, used that as evidence against Brian in a formal complaint. Big mistake. We went to the ICO and we realised what Ashley had done, and he was held up to have committed a personal data breach. And he had to undo it. And the only way he was going to have to undo that is A, get the copies he'd sent round to the mob, because we knew he'd done it, and also withdraw his complaint. It was a formal complaint through the formal complaints process. He even refused to do that, even though he knew he was bang to rights guilty. But you know what? And I'll leave you with this. He's still sitting there as a clerk of HBC. Would you believe it? Hope you've enjoyed this. I'll be back soon. Take care.